order. And if you would do a roll call, please.
Inglesby,
Here.
Mitchell,
Here.
Tobias,
Present.
Heiser, Flores Kale,
Here.
Zuniga, Bradshaw,
Here.
oh, Parsley, Parsley, and Cohen.
Here.
Okay, next item is approval of the minutes. If you have had an opportunity to review, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any questions or comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 3, citizen comment period. Do we have anyone here to speak under citizen comment period? Has anyone signed up? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 4. Consider impossible action under number 4.2, receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction regarding the selection of an engineer for Kohler's Crossing intersection improvements. Mr. Barber.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Mayor and Council and Commission members. Leon Barber, City Engineer. Are we plugged in? At the last board meeting, the Commission tasked us with coming up with an engineer to do the design for the intersections on Colors, Cromwell, Benner, and Sanders. I'm not getting a screen shot here. Grant. Next slide. Just go ahead and go next slide. Just to give you a little bit of summary, we did do a study back in January of 2023 that justified the use of either a roundabout or a traffic signal. We did issue the RFQ back on June 21st of 23, and we did receive 7 submittals. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Leon, we got 2 council members trying to get into the meeting virtually, and I know they want to hear what you have to say. Is it okay with the chair if we wait just 1 second to make sure we get them in? Did we send them the right link? I mean, Ashley's in, so obviously they're in.
Do we know who's on standby?
It's both Danielle and Bear.
Okay.
Apparently, there's something with the app. They're reinstalling it. I apologize.
I might see Heiser.
Ring Central for our virtual meeting, but we're doing Teams now for our actual virtual meetings. Is that right? We're staying with Ring Central. Do you know?
I don't know.
No.
Hey, can you hear me?
Ready?
Can you
Yes.
guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and
Go ahead and
proceed.
start. Okay. Let me go back over this slide again. We had already confirmed that the Cromwell and Benner and Sanders intersections met the warrants for either roundabout or a traffic signal. But at the June 22nd meeting, we were directed by the commissioners to go out and do an RFQ to select a firm to do the roundabouts for the along Kohlers. We did issue it on June 21st, and by July 21st, we had received 7 submittals. We evaluated the proposals, and based on the review, the top scoring firm was Kimley Horn and Associates. And I need to take a break and kind of tell you that in all my years of going through RFQs and looking at proposals and evaluating the different firms, I've never seen such a very tight, almost a tie on this particular selection. Just to let you know, there were 5 members on the panel. The most you could give each firm was 100 points, so it's 500 points maximum. The Kimley Horn had 460 points, and American Structure Point had 459 points. I looked at the way the members voted. It was a 2-horse race, actually. It was between Kimley Horn and American Structure Point. 2 of the panel members had Kimley Horn at the top of their list. 2 of the other panel members had American Structure Point at the top of their list. The 5th panel member had them tied. So, usually when we have something like that, what we do is have oral interviews with the firms. But being this is such a very important and special project, I wanted to make sure that we allowed y'all to look at what we ended up with and probably give us some direction on what the next steps that are that we should take to select the firm that does this work for us. I've given you some options. Option 1, select Kimley Horn and Associates based on the panel scoring. Option 2, select American Structure Point based on the board's approval. Option 3, direct staff to conduct formal interviews with two firms and return with a recommendation. Option 4 would be select an interviewing panel from the board to conduct interviews with the 2 firms. Option 5, do not approve. Option 6, any other recommendations that you may want to come up with. And here's the ranking. There was a difference of 1 point. So Kimley Horn had a 92.0 and American Structure Point had a 91.8. Wow. It's a virtual tie. These are 2 good firms. They're both good firms.
So, members of the board, from my perspective, city manager perspective, I would recommend the American Structure Point proposal to you. I think you really can't go wrong with any of these firms. From our position, it's a statistical tie between the top 2. It's 2 points between the 2. Both qualified firms, but I think we were impressed with the renderings that American Structure Point presented to us. They've also done some work in this area, and I know they did some work in the Carmel, Indiana area that I know the council has seen, was impressed by, and vision for that kind of area in this district is something that I think would bode well for us. That's just our recommendation. Certainly, you're free to pursue any direction that you want to, but I want to make sure, since it kind of was a virtual tie, I wanted to give you at least a recommendation to start with.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. I know that American Structure Point has been nationally recognized and won an award for the design of the roundabout at FM 3237 and FM 150.
Yes, ma'am.
They specialize in roundabouts, and so I'm comfortable with your recommendation. But I'd like any other discussion from the board. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to concur with the chair and as well as the city manager. I think I'm trying to remember how many contracts we've given Kimley Horn through the years. They've received numerous contracts from the city, and they're a very reputable company. They do a lot of good work. But as it relates to the specific type of intersections we're trying to make here, American Structure Point is nationally recognized, and also they had a huge impact on the city of Kyle in terms of how we thought about our processes for signalized intersections. If you'll remember, the Caseta Ranch roundabout was a situation that was very unfortunate. I don't know who the actual engineer for the Caseta Ranch roundabout was, but when we went through that process, we realized that there were a lot of deficiencies in our policies for bringing about really high-quality intersections, and we were sort of compelled through our relationship with American Structure Point to bolster our policies and ordinances to make sure that that kind of issue didn't happen again. And so for me, the engineering firm that is most qualified for roundabout engineering is American Structure Point, so I'm in concurrence.
Any other discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate the closeness of the two. I think that gives us a really good opportunity to stick with a good company. Since they're so close, it would be my suggestion to have interviews, only because I think it's important to make sure that we're going to be able to work well with whoever we choose. And I think it's important for staff to have a good feeling about whoever it is we choose to work with. More important than I think just being able to have the skill is also being able to have the communication and the relationship that I think is important. But that's completely dependent on how fast people want these roundabouts up. I'm okay giving it an extra 2 weeks, or, giving staff the availability to have a conversation with both companies and get a good feel of each.
Any other?
I just want to concur with the city manager's recommendation and our chair to go with American Structure Point.
I mean, normally I would say the same thing with interviews, but if you, Brian and staff, are comfortable, I don't need to meddle in that, if that's your recommendation.
It is, again, I think both of the top two firms are well qualified. It's a very narrow difference between the two, but we're comfortable with recommending American Structure Point.
I would like to make a motion to approve American Structure Point as the firm.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to make a comment.
Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, you said that Kimley Horn has received contracts many before
Yes, numerous, yeah.
and has structural
They,
received a few?
their focus, so they received one of the road bond projects, BB.
Okay.
So Kimley Horn also received one, I
They're
believe.
subcontractor for the prime contract, this is prime engineer, yes.
And they sort of have a specialty, or they're very good at the roundabout
They were,
design?
they were retained by our principal, general contractor, to provide oversight over the roundabouts within the bond program. That's their specialty.
Mr. Tobias, did you have a comment?
I'll yield.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to know more background on these two facts.
Okay. If there is no further discussion or comments, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all. Is there anything else, Mr. Barber, on that item?
Pardon?
Is there anything else
No,
on this
no,
item?
okay, no, so there isn't.
Okay. All righty, if not, we'll go on to number 3, award the contract to WGI Inc., Houston, Texas, in the amount of $57,400 for 30% engineering design of La Verde parking lot. Mr. Barber.
Commissioners, we were also directed to select an engineering firm to do some work for the parking lot design there. I need the next presentation. And we were directed to look at the whole parking lot. And so we do have a proposal in front of you. It'll be popping up in a minute. Pardon? He's aware. Grant? we go. Just to remind everybody, this is the location of the parking lot that we're looking at. And this is broken down into the acreage that we have there for that particular tract. You have a north half, you have the center tract, which is owned by the developer on the north of the northern tract, and then you have that southern tract, which is owned by the school district. And we were directed to proceed with the whole tract option with the consultant. We're recommending WGI Incorporated. They've done quite a bit of work in the area, so they're very familiar with the area. They have a lot of controls in place out there, so in my opinion, they were the best firm to be able to do the work. They have a proposal for the amount of $57,400 for 30% design, and the contract is in the backup. Just to remind everybody, when we looked at the parking lots, we did one for just a basic parking lot, just to excavate, put some base down, put some hot mix down, some striping, and some curb stops, and that was about it. Nothing fancy, just a plain old parking lot. And no, there were some questions about some of the cost. And just to summarize everything, we went out and somebody was asking about what does a contractor charge for this. So we went out and talked to some contractors, had a couple of contractors. We asked them, based on your rough estimates, what would it cost you to build a parking lot, a basic parking lot? One contractor said 1.2 million, another contractor said 1.9. WGI's estimate at the time was about $1 million. And Public Works had given us an estimate for materials only, and we asked them to look at labor and equipment and materials, and they came up with their number of $786,000. But just to remind you, the Public Works cost doesn't include all the overhead, the taxes, all the insurance costs that other contractors have to pay as part of their business, the operation. So we have some options for you. Option one is to award the contract to WGI Incorporated for the 30% design. Option two, do not approve. Option three, any other recommendations? And again, I remind you, the 30% design that they've proposed is for the whole parking lot. Also in your backup is an alternate proposal from WGI. It's just to do the southern half. I think it's about $51,350. So if we just decide to do the southern half, that's what their proposal would be for doing that southern half for the design, just for the southern half of the property. Questions?
Leon, why would they only do 30% design? Can we get more design for the cost?
We like to do 30% because if we decide to change the scope and go in a different direction, when we ask them to come back to amend their contract to add in to complete the project, we can add things or we can delete things. That's why I like to do 30% initially. We can get the whole proposal, but at that point, they're just guessing on where they're going to end up. So I like to do the 30% just to make sure that they're aimed in the right direction, if so to speak.
So it could save you if you have change orders or
Yes.
something unanticipated.
Yeah. That's correct, because if you get it to 90%, you decide, oh, geez, we really didn't mean that, then it's too late then. So 30% also gives a better estimate for us. Right now, if you ask me what the cost would be for a full-blown parking lot for the whole site, I'd have to say between $1.5 and $2 million. But that's as good as I can get, because I don't know where we're going to be in 3 or 6 months with prices. For just the southern half, it would be roughly between $600,000 to $800,000. But those are just guesses right now on my part. When we get to 30%, we'll get a better number from them of what it's going to cost. And as we go to 60, 90%, obviously we get better numbers on what the project's going to cost us. And it helps us with our budget, of course.
Thank you, Leon.
I have a question. So if we're looking at 57,400 for 30%, does that mean we can like triple that plus a little bit more to get a good idea of how much it's going to cost to engineer the whole parking lot?
You can probably take about 10% of the parking lot. If it's $1.7 million, it might be $170,000. It just depends on how much detail we ask them to go into. On this particular parking lot, we're going to add the charging spaces. I think we asked them to look at putting at least 5% of the charging spaces in there. The lighting, we don't know what that's going to cost. So all those things add up. So roughly 10 to 15% for engineers what it would cost.
Okay, so are you telling me it's going to be like closer to like $1.2, $1.3 million to build this?
No. So if let's assume it's a $2 million project, so 200,000, 200 plus thousand. So 50,000 from 200, about another 150.
Right, but I'm saying total, like.
Total about 200, 250.
So let me ask you this again in a different way. Total cost, if the engineering is like $250,000 250, is that what you're saying?
Pretty close, 200.
And then
to
is it an
250.
additional $1 million on top of that to build? Okay, so it's like $1.3 million
It'd be-
for,
Let's
build
assume
up?
it's a $2 million parking lot.
okay, so it's gonna
2
be,
million plus their fee would be another 2.25.
so we're looking at a $2.25 million parking lot?
Right.
But we only approved $1 million.
The $1 million was just for the parking lot without any frills on it.
Okay.
But if we go down to just doing the southern half, we can do it for that budget.
What are the frills? Is you
Curb and gutter, trees, additional sidewalks.
But this is temporary, right?
Well, if I could, I'm going to try to address a couple of these questions. So I think the first thing is, we don't know what the final cost is going to be. I mean, that will be determined through the design. So as we go through it, determining what kind of landscaping, what lighting you want, how many charging stations, all those things cost money. So determining that, then we can get a better estimate of what the final cost is. I think we were trying to, I think, show the $2 million cost is.
That's just a rough estimate, very rough estimate.
An estimate of that, but those are numbers that you can certainly control. We talked about this, I think, at the last board meeting, but I wanted to clarify that the northern tract is property that we don't currently own. The city does not own that. We will own that in the future when we meet some performance objectives in the agreements that we have there. It will be conveyed to us. It's always been meant to be some type of office building, office use there. So that, if we did construct a lot there, it would be a temporary use. That would be for the northern tract. And as Leon and I have looked at that, and I've thought about that with our staff, we'd recommend the southern tract be constructed. And certainly the will of the board if you want to do both. But the southern tract be constructed, and then you have some good connectivity on the east side. Is that, I think it's Everett. I'm not quite sure what the street is on the east side of the area, that you would have sidewalks and landscaping to connect back up to the park area. So that would also be something that we could look at of what that cost savings would be, and it would certainly be far less than the $2 million if you just did the southern track. But those are things for you to consider. That would be our recommendation, is do the southern track. You could always do more later, but I think the other piece of it is you only want to build this once, and if you build it and you end up we end up putting an office building there in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it might be, you would have to tear all of that work out, and it'd be expense and cost that we paid for that then we'd be removing. So just something for you to consider. I think as we looked at it, the southern track would be our recommendation to you.
Thank you.
Brian.
Okay, so I guess to hit on the point, I guess what Councilmember Flores' scale is saying is that, I guess the idea was that we're gonna design this specific parking lot, and this would be the possible total amount was the $1 million, I think, what we were looking at. So correct me if I'm wrong with floor scale. And then I think now the added fees or the design fees, which I knew that would probably be there, now it seems like it's increasing to 1.2 million on this parking lot. And then it could be, in the final phases, up to a $2 million parking lot. And so I know there's going to be growth that's going to be coming around there. This first I've heard about possible offices in that area. I thought it was also going to be retail. But I think it's just something to really look at to see. I think where the real question is that we were given a number of $1 million, and then as these are starting to add up, now we're looking at possibly close to $2 million for that area. And is it a combination of both north and south tracks, or is it just the $1 million for the south track that we originally planned on? And I get it about the design plans, because when you design something like this, like a parking lot, you want to be able to make sure you have adequate exits and entrance ways, lighting, and so forth. I'm starting to really think twice about adding a bunch of trees and things like that with what we got going on with droughts. Maybe that's just something that we just need to take off the table on something like that. Obviously, no waterfalls. But I think that's just maybe what now I'm starting to look at, okay, where are we at as far as the dollar amount goes? If we're looking at now going forward with a $2 million parking lot for two of them, is it gonna be $1 million for each and so forth?
Let me see if I can explain this a little bit better. The numbers that you have in front of you were for a basic parking lot. This is just, like I said, just excavate, put some gravel down, pave it, striping, and some curb stops, and a little bit of sidewalk to get folks from one end to the other. That was the whole site. But that was just a basic parking lot. But if that was the direction that was given to me, that we wanted a firm that's going to design a parking lot that's our golden standard. It's going to have the trees, the irrigation, the lights, everything that you need to have a good-looking parking lot, if parking lots could be good-looking. But anyway, so the 30% that we would ask WGI to look at would give us that number to say it's 1.2 million, it's 3 million. We don't know, but that's the 30%. That when you get that 30%, we're going to get a better number to say, do we want to move forward with this or not? And if we do decide to move forward, then at least we know we have better numbers at that point in time, and we can budget for that. But it could be less than, it could be 1.5. I just don't know at this point in time.
I understand. Yeah,
So-
I agree with that.
Okay.
And like I said, I'm not trying to argue that point out. I get it. And we don't really know what the full amount is, but just keep in mind that it could be more than the million that we were originally requesting.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Leon, I'm sorry, I don't see in the backup, what would if we just did the recommendation, staff recommendation of the south portion, what would that cost be, estimated cost plus the frills, as you referenced?
I spoke to the engineer today for WGI, and we were thinking about between 600 to 800,000. Again, we'll get a better number at 30%.
And what would be north and south plus frills? That would be like that 2.2?
We were thinking 1.5 to 2 million.
Okay. 1.5 to 2?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And if we were to go with both, or I guess in either scenario, is there any opportunity for Public Works to step in and handle some of the frills aspect, the lighting, the beautification?
I don't believe so. The lighting, the curb and, they don't do curb and gutter.
Okay.
I think that'd be beyond their capacity to do those kinds of things.
Okay. So you can't do it either? No?
I could try, but I don't
Thanks.
think you'd like the product.
Thanks, Brian.
Yes.
Brian, we don't yet own the northern track, correct?
Correct.
So, initially I wanted to do it all, but the fact that, for one, the northern tract is in a conveyance timeline that we don't yet have, and number two, it's earmarked for a vertical Class A structure with the potential of retail on the bottom. I'm inclined to say, let's just go with what we know. Since the mentality here is let's do it the right way. Let's build the parking lot that we know is going to last, as opposed to building a parking lot designed to last on a site that really our plans are for something different. So, it's not like we're losing economies of scale by just doing the southern parking lot to start. Maybe a smidge, but not a lot, right?
As far as parking spaces, if we did the whole tract, we're looking at 244. If we go to just the south half, we're looking at 146.
Okay, well, that's a lot more parking spots than we had before, and we don't yet really know what the demand would be, and if it's the situation where we build the southern lot. Well, let me actually back up. If we're going to do just the southern lot, as to your recommendation, I think it makes sense to go ahead and fully commit to the charging stations out there, because it's obviously going to be more within our budget, and then we can build up the one lot that we know is going to last, and then sort of just kind of see where it goes from there, as opposed to building it on the site. So does this engineering include the electrification?
Yes.
I'm fine with staff recommendation for the southern lot.
Any other? Yes.
I do have a question. I would be a lot less concerned if there wasn't already a talk of a parking garage going over there. And so I guess I kind of have a question regarding how much it's going to cost to tear it all down. Because I'd like to take that into consideration as we build up. Because I don't want to see trees out there if we're going to have to dig them up or replant them. Do I want them to look nice? Yeah, that would be ideal. But it would make me feel incredibly guilty if we put all this money into a temporary parking lot to build a garage within 5 years, which it looks like it's on the CIP for that long, but I could be wrong. I do want a nice parking lot. I just don't want to gold standard it if we're not intending to keep it longer than 10 years.
Well, as has been said at the last meeting, the plan for the vertical parking garage is not on this site. It's at a completely different part of the brick and mortar district, so I don't believe that concern is something we need to worry too much about.
Okay, well, and is this going to be longer than, like, when you say temporary, I guess my question is, how long are we going to have this parking lot before we tear it down, and what is the tear down going to look like?
My understanding is we have 17 years left with that agreement with the school district.
Okay, so yeah, that's really not short term, that's more long term. So if we're gonna, if staff is telling us we're gonna have it for 17 years, then I can get on board with making it look a little bit nicer, so long as that's the plan.
Commissioner, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve agenda item number 3, please.
Second?
Second.
Okay, and is that with the option to do just the southern tract at this time? Is that correct? Or-
Yes.
Okay. All righty. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes.
So just a question that I have, we don't really know what we're gonna build out there, so the southern track, it doesn't really need to be ripped up, right? We could actually just leave it there, leave it alone,
That's correct.
because we've got the northern track that we can build up on.
That's
So-
correct.
So it's kind of premature to expect that that would be torn in 17 years, because we don't have to do that, right? We could leave it alone,
I really wouldn't like to see that happen.
right? I wouldn't
No,
like to see
Council-
that
no,
happen
Commissioner.
either.
Can
But it's
we,
supposed to be dedicated to the city, so we have all the authority over that. City has authority to control what goes there.
To build on the northern, right?
the motion on the floor is to approve the agenda item, but would you mind, Councilmember Tobias, amending it to include the specific tract of land? Yes, because
Recommendation, right?
yes, right now, if you approve it, it's 30% engineering, but it doesn't specify for what part. So if you could include that, that way there's clarity for staff and for the future.
I could go ahead and make an amendment to my motion, please.
Second.
Again, there is a motion and a second with clarification that it's for the southern
Right.
Southern track.
tract, yes.
It was clarified
Yes.
that the original motion is for the southern lot, correct?
Southern tract is
Yeah.
that's what we heard, correct?
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, number 4, approval of a resolution of the Board of Directors of the City of Kyle Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 2, adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Mr. Perry.
Madam Chair and board members, for the record, I'm Pervez Mohit, City's Director of Finance. While we were pausing for agenda items 2 and 3, I handed out the budget for, document. It should be before you. Board Member Zuniga, if I didn't leave one before you.
I have one up here,
Okay,
Fred.
good. So this document is kind of difficult to put it on a slide. So I chose to give you a handout. So let me walk you through what the document includes. It's a 5-page document. Page 1 of 5 is a summary of the proposed budget for next year. Excuse me. Pages 2, 3, and 4 are line item proposed budget for next year, but they also give you prior actual history, the current approved budget, and the proposed budget. And the last page, page 5 of 5, is the 5-year forecast. So this evening, which the agenda is posted for, is for the board's consideration of the proposed budget. So I'll focus on more on page 1 of 5, which is the summary of the line item budget for next year. So it removes all the other information. So the budget on page 1 of 5 for next year has 37 lines, and I'll briefly walk you through those very, very quickly. Line 1 is the beginning balance that we estimate that we're going to start the fiscal year with, $10.1 million. Line 3 shows you the estimated revenue and new bond proceeds that we're expecting next year. So line 4 will show you the tax increment that we are estimating that will come from City of Kyle, 1.5 million. Line 5 is tax increment that will be coming from Hays County, $920,000. And you'll recall that TIRZ number 2 is a 50% TIRZ, meaning the city participates 50% of its tax revenue and the county participates at 50%. So this is the 50% share of each jurisdiction. Line 6, we are projecting that we'll be issuing new bonds next year, $15.3 million. So that's the bond proceeds that will be coming into the TIRZ fund to make it available for capital expenditures. And I'll walk you through what those capital expenditures are. So line 9 now shows you the total amount of funds that we estimate will be available for TIRZ operating and capital expenditures, $27.8 million. Now with line 11, we itemize the funding requirements or expenditures that we estimate for next year. So beginning with line 12, we're not setting aside any money for general administration. The city will pick up that expense. For example, my time or the city manager's time. Line 13, legal services, $5,500. Line 14, public notices, $4,600. Line 15, landscaping and groundskeeping for La Verde Park, $60,500 is our estimate for next year. Line 16 is landscaping and groundskeeping expenses for Heroes Memorial Park, $60,500. Line 17, landscaping and groundskeeping for the PAC is $30,343. Line 18, 19 are for debt service. So line 18 is for the debt, $8 million that the TIRZ has already issued. So the debt service next year on that is $507,000. This is the principal and interest due next year. Line 19, for the new bonds, the $15.3 million that we anticipate issuing next year, we don't anticipate debt service will be due next year because of the timing. We anticipate selling those bonds somewhere in May, late April, early May timeframe. So next fiscal year, we will not have any principal or interest due on it. Line 20 is the reimbursement amount to the city's general fund, $400,000. This is the reimbursement back to the city's general fund from TIRZ revenues for the general fund that has fronted the money for La Verde Park, Heroes Memorial Park, and other improvements. That's $400,000. So on line 23, these are the funding requirements for operating and debt service. Line 25, we now show you the capital expenditures. These are the CIPs that we are estimating for next year. The retail roads that we have talked about before the board, there are 3 roads, $8 million. That's the $8 million that we issued debt is ready. The design should be ready, and we anticipate construction to begin next fiscal year. Line 26, 27, 28 are the 3 roundabouts that we have discussed in our prior meetings. roundabout at Cromwell Drive, Benner Road, and Sanders, we are estimating that we will need about $1.5 million next fiscal year to get the capital work started for engineering, for design, and any utility relocations. And then on line 29 that Leon talked about, the temporary parking lot, we had estimated in the budget about $1 million. So the total capital expenditures for next year is 13.5. Line 33 is a reserve requirement for us to set aside $254,000 based on the debt that we recently issued. We assured the bondholders that we will keep a minimum reserve of $254,000. So that's what you see on 33. So when you look at line 35, the total requirements next year for operating and capital expenditures is $15 million. And then last line 37 is our estimated fund balance for next year. At end of fiscal year, it'll be about $13 million remaining. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. All the details are in your packet as well as in front of you. Yes.
Yes, I just have two questions. So for the landscaping for La Verde, Heroes Memorial, and it looks like the PAC, does that include water, the cost of water?
No, this is strictly for the maintenance company, third party that comes and mows, trims, edges.
Should that be included? I mean, I guess I'm curious. I think anything that's within the TIRZ boundary should be covered by the TIRZ, and I don't think that we should be covering out of the general fund any water that's used in that area. Not because it's in that area, just would we do that for any other TIRZ? With
Technically, the answer should be yes. And we'll work with Parks Department because the meters are controlled by the Parks Department. I want to make sure that they know that if the board decides to do that, I'll make sure that the Parks Department is clearly aware of that so they can segregate the monthly billings for the water charges so we can assign it to the TIRZ.
And even if they just want to try it out for a year so we get a good concept so you can budget the next year, it would be nice to at least be prepared for that. My second question is going to be, the general fund is getting paid back $400.
$400,000.
$400,000, sorry. 400,000. Okay. Is there any interest being charged to the money that the general fund lends to the TIRZ?
No, it's just the principal amount loaned to the TIRZ is being returned over time.
Okay, I kind of have, my only concern is if that happens somewhere else, I don't want to make the habit of a TIRZ borrowing money interest-free. So I don't know if eventually the TIRZ board would like to discuss 1 or 2% interest, just something, because it is taxpayer money being used to fund that, and I don't know of any other situation where you wouldn't charge any type of interest.
It's the board's decision, which I want to decide on that.
I guess I have a question. Oh, that would be a legal question. Then could we do that? Is it legal for us to charge interest on our own projects or our own section?
We'd need to take a look at that, and I was actually writing a note to myself to look on whether interest could be paid, since it's still considered public dollars. So we would be able to bring back a response at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you, because that would be something that, it's like, okay, well, they're setting up TIRZ, so they're using general fund money, but then again, they want to pay themselves back, but they also want to pay themselves back with interest going to a certain area. And I don't know if that could be a conflict later on, is what I'm saying.
We can certainly look into that, sir.
Thank you.
I think if the question is, do you want to charge back the most amount of money possible from the parks? The answer is, yeah, you can find a way to do it, but I'm not sure that's in the spirit of the way that we set these parks up. So for me, having there be a reimbursement back to the general fund for the expenditure on these funds is a generous way of setting up the deal. And it, over time will allow for us to refund. I mean, another way to look at it is, when's the last time we spent money out of the general fund to build a park and got paid back at all? So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but in this situation, the county is participating, and they are helping us to be able to make major improvements to our community while it, becomes a very fiscally responsible program, so that the dollars we spend actually come back to the general fund, and those dollars coming back are partly county dollars. So in my mind, the way that it's set up is appropriate. So I would prefer not to ask legal to spend any time trying to figure out whether or not they can or cannot charge interest, because the answer is we can set the dollars that we want to be refunded, but those refunded dollars are partially county dollars, and I just don't think that's in the spirit of
Exactly, because you will be like, in the end, saying, okay, if we set something like this up, well, how much does the county get?
Right.
And how much does the city get? And if it's, where do you divide that line of like, who gets specific dollars back from that interest versus, is it more for the city, more for the county? And it'll be just more, I guess, financial, in my opinion, more legal work that you'd have to try to figure out if we were to do that. Now, I can understand, say, well, if we're borrowing from one to pay for the other, we should look at it like, well, let's charge interest on it, so that way that it goes back to the fund. But the overall spirit of it all, like you're saying, it's for the city, it's for the residents. The investment is for the people, no matter what, on that end.
And in the end, it's all taxpayer
It's all
funds, so,
taxpayer funds.
Yes, and I don't know how, because, and I'm not sure, Councilmember, if you were talking about just the city receiving any kind of interest, but, then, we talk about the county, and I don't know that we have that kind of set up in any TIRZ that the county participates in.
No, ma'am, we don't.
Yeah, even with other
Right.
municipalities.
I had a quick question too. Perez, sorry, I didn't want to stop the conversation y'all
No,
had.
please.
Perez, so line 18 and 19, this is the debt that we've issued in bonds from 2023 and coming for next year, 18 plus 15, right? 23 million there?
Yes, sir.
But if you look at the CIP total estimated expenditures, 31, line item 31, we have 13.5 million in CIP expenditures. So where's the other 10 million in why do we have more bond issued than the CIP expenditures?
So,
Just so I can have a good
right.
knowledge of this.
Right. So the 8 million we've already issued, that money is spoken for the 3 retail roads.
Okay,
So the design is almost done, or should be pretty much done. The construction should begin next year. So we have to have that money available to let the contract.
right?
The roundabouts are estimated to be around $5.1 million for each location.
5.1 to build,
Yes, sir.
but you have
Design-
1.5 here.
Okay, so this is CIPs, most CIPs will be designed and built over a number of years, right?
Oh, okay.
So this is
that's
just for next year,
Right.
what we need.
Okay,
And the year after that will be completion of the design and most likely the start of the construction.
okay, I thought we were getting a good price on the roundabouts at 1.5 million. It's more
Oh,
like
no,
5.
Leon would be jumping up and down if
So
this was.
that's where the extra 10 in the bond debt is. It's still floating out there because
Yes,
it's gonna be
sir.
graduated
Yes, sir.
Maybe they could set a ranch rent.
as we need it. As we
Yes.
finish one, we
Yes.
get a little more debt
Yes,
to
right.
finish the other.
We anticipate selling the $15 million because as the interest rates move away from us,
Okay,
we want to capture that benefit.
right, and you don't want to pay for a project that's not complete, obviously either, so.
Right. And we are delaying the issuance of bonds until late spring next year, so we'll have a better handle of where the design is on the roundabouts, how close are we. If we're not close to completing the design, we may push the issuance of the bonds to the following year.
Okay, thank you. That was relief. I felt relief when I heard that. It's still out there, and it just is not the full
Yes, sir.
thing yet. Okay.
So
But
when you look at the 5-year spending plan,
Right.
it will show the entire expenditure over the 5-year window.
Okay.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget.
Okay,
Second that.
there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
carries. Thank you. Okay, item number 5, discussion regarding scheduling the next meeting. Date proposed?
You got a date for us, Brian?
Hear a lot of grumbling.
I don't. I think when we're ready to come back with the design, maybe we can reach out to you guys, or at least the 30% design on the parking lot, come back and have that discussion. I don't know if we have a good time frame for that. Leon, we may want to just reach back out to you.
Okay.
Unless there's a specific date you'd like to pick now.
Okay, we can just wait on,
Okay.
yeah, y'all to come back.
Is that
I
reasonable?
guess there's no need for executive session, is that
No, ma'am.
correct? Okay, and.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Thank y'all very much. We're adjourned.